how did I get into it? I have always wanted to do this all my life. As a kid, my first job was working in a library, and then I went off to college and went to journalism school at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University, and that was really the foundation to my learning how to be a writer and a newspaper reporter. So that was my training. I came out and was a newspaper reporter for a short period of time, and I discovered I couldn't eat because it pays so poorly. So anyway, so that evolved into a real estate career in a lot of different positions for many, many years. And but I always had in the back of my mind that this is what I wanted to do. And finally, about 8-10 years ago, I started working on a storyline, which was this first one, Murder on the Master. And when I did that, you know, I was fitting it in around work and a lot of commuting time, a lot of driving, all this kind of, the practicality of life, right? So college bills and all those things that you do. And I ended up setting it aside after about 8 chapters in. And then about 3-4 years ago, I decided, you know what? I want to do this. I got to get it done. So I decided that pretty much for a good couple years, I came home at the end of a long day, and I ended up, after dinner, you know, getting things settled, I'd go upstairs and I'd work from 8:30 or so until often midnight, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, working on this first book. And then, you know, it's quite a process. So if you're someone who wanted to go through the traditional route and not self-publish, which is what I had in mind, I ended up going ahead and looking for a literary agent. Well, that's quite a process. You know, lots of querying, lots of rejections. But ironically enough, actually, my real estate career and life had taught me a couple things, and that was to accept rejection, to keep knocking on doors, and to just keep focused on what you wanted to try to get to. You know, that's another part of the reason for this storyline, was because I really, after being in my business, real estate, for so many years and seeing it in so many different positions and so many different levels, I knew how hard people work in that business. It's not an easy one. It's not HGTV like everybody thinks it is. And not every house is $1 million multi-gorgeous property. It's day-to-day people, right? So, but I really also felt as if it was an opportunity to show people what the business is like from the inside. One of my favorite authors, who I followed all my life, my mother introduced me to him, was Dick Francis, the famous writer from England, who wrote about horse racing. And of course, he was the famous jockey. He was the Queen's jockey. He was that good. But when he finally retired, his series of books, and I think he wrote about 40 of them before he just passed away, but they all showed his business of horse racing from different vantage points, whether it was a photographer, whether it was the jockey themselves, whether it was someone who was the trainer, you know, all these different people, there were different roles. And I admired that tremendously. Yeah. And what's kind of fun about Helen, and the reason I chose her as far as her age, she's in her 50s. I wanted to be a mature woman. I felt an awful lot of storylines are about young women, and I really wanted to be about someone who's been around the block a few times, goes to work every day, didn't inherit, you know, has to make a living. And in doing that, it ended up, it's fun in that, you know, it is a way of showing people that even people in their 50s and 60s and later can be a lot of fun and be very smart and aggressive, and they can not be afraid. I'll tell you what stumps me. What stumps me is deciding who the killer is. That is a real challenge for me. I vacillate for, believe it or not, quite a while as I'm working through the storyline. And you know, if you're someone who is interested in writing and how writers work, a lot of them are described as outliners, and then there's other people that are called pantsers. In other words, they write from the seat of their pants. And I would definitely lean towards the pantser side of things. I just sort of let it go where I want it, where it leads me. I obviously have certain characters that I have in mind, and but others get pulled in throughout the process. But finding the killer and deciding who that actually is, I struggle with that. I think sometimes it helps though, because you end up with a more interesting story because you're trying to figure it out even as the reader's trying to figure it out. A lot of red herrings.